I are doing providing professional development and technical assistance. So that's the part we play is in supporting our statewide learning on this topic. Fostering student buy-in is the topic of our session today. And as an overview, we're going to talk about 4 components that are suggested by the research, and that's learn and inspire our learners' interests, model success, make cost-benefit correlations, and have staff reflecting the learners and their values. So first, these were my musings on the initial strategy. Learn and inspire learners' interests. So as I think about that topic, as you think about that topic, you might be wondering, how do we get to know our students' interests? How do we promote student voice and choice? How do we customize content to ensure that it's personally relevant to our students? How do we ensure that daily content is both immediately applicable to the lives of our students and understood? How do we facilitate personal associations to new content and build on what students already know and enjoy? Do we provide frequent, engaging, interactive, and critical thought activities? And finally, include vivid and compelling multimodality content for learners. That seems like a lot, and hopefully it doesn't make you tired to hear it, but I believe we do all these things. And invite you to think about what you do that best represents this. What are some examples of what you do already that allow you to learn your students' interests better and also inspire them to maintain that interest? Here is some of what the research says. So here's an opportunity for someone to be a reader for us on what the research says from the National Research Council of the National Academies in 2012. And that is this beautiful publication that I believe I received initially from you, John Anderson. It's a really well-written, lovely publication that has lots of meaty content, and it was referenced by AIR as one of our source documents for this topic. Who can I ask to read for us these snippets of research?
I can.
Thank you.
Yep. Adult learners are likely to put forth more effort and stay engaged in tasks they find interesting. Personal interest is the interest that learners bring into the classroom. It represents their long-standing preferences. Situational interest is inspired by a particular event or characteristic of an experience, such a the features of a text or task. The real challenge, however, here, let me make this bigger. The real challenge, however, is moving learners from situational to personal or sustained interest in a way that inspires them to persist even when they face challenging reading tasks.
Thank you. And what's your name?
My name is Aubrey Rudd.
Aubrey, thank you so much, Aubrey.
You're welcome.
And thanks for graciously correcting one of my typos. And I figured that this would allow also for my typos to be revealed. So in humility, I received that. Such as the features, and then yeah. Thank you so much, Ashley, for reading for us on this distinction between personal interest and situational interest. Situational being the part that we have effect over. We have an impact over the compelling nature of the presentation of materials. And things being laid out in a way that are really easy for the students to understand, making sure they comprehend our content and our teacher talk will be more of the situational, and the personal is our opportunity to get to know what our students are really interested in and engaged in.
Laura, can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
This is actually something that's been I've been fermenting, and I got it on every single desk I work on in this building at this point. Is 100 years ago, okay, 30, when I started, we were required to do interest inventories on our students. And I've been doing some research and looking into this because I'm like, how do people express what their interests are now when okay, let's get the tape done. Okay, let's get them to class. Okay, let's do a GED ready. How do we gather that information in a way that teachers can get it sooner and not the student having to stick out 6 weeks before we know who they are? And is anybody doing anything to get that information more quickly?
Excellent points. And I think I would add, what does that mean when for an agency that has an evening class of, what do you have, 20, 35 learners versus maybe a different situation or delivery model where maybe, you're working more on one-on-one or very small groups and have that ability to use that information about personal interest to customize or inform instruction.
Well, and just to flip the coin, I'll play devil's advocate and bring up the other side of it. We also want to guard against, especially our GED level students, only having them work on things that are interesting to them, because the fact of the matter is we all have to learn things that aren't interesting to us throughout our lives. So, you don't want to fall into the trap of personalizing too much to the point where, well, I'm not going to read anything unless it has to do with soccer. That's not a good practice either. So yeah, I think that it's one of those things that's always, it seems so simple on the surface, and it's when you start to dig into it, it's really, really layered.
You also have to take it on a case-by-case basis. For example, I always do a little bit of history reading in the class because it's relevant, American history readings because it's relevant content. I have one guy who, you can tell he's a history nerd. He always wants to ask the big, all these great questions. And I'm like, those are great. I would love to sit down and talk to you about this, but let's come back to it later. If you could stay 5 minutes after class, we can have a heart-to-heart about it. But right now I got to keep everyone's focus.
Are
I
there
was
ever,
wondering
oh, sorry.
I was wondering if Kate or another doctor who's had, and it doesn't have to be UK, but I know we have a few teachers in the state that have used offered student choice in reading selection, perhaps with STAR methodology or with utilizing ReadWorks and other tools that we are afforded through technology, where students can have some opportunity to select the content area.
I noted Nikita had made a comment in the chat about using intro slides or her introduction using slides. But to Kate's point, are there ever time, and granted, you have how much content you need to get through in the modules and so forth, but are there ever times when certain students resonate with certain content and that you can give them some more leadership opportunities or ability to demonstrate or peer tutoring kind of opportunities? I just, those GED ceremonies at corrections and hearing when those peer tutors talk about, wow, they had never saw themselves as a leader, a teacher, someone who, can make difference in other lives. And, I think we have those opportunities. Our students need to see themselves in that light. Anyway, thank you.
For me, certainly because we read about every topic under the sun, I invite the students to bring in their personal experience. I remember reading some medical things a while back, not intense medical texts, of course, but I had a student who had been a nurse in their country and they were able to bring in some of that previous knowledge. I've had students with specific careers or specific interests bring in that outside knowledge, and that's very helpful. Or if they don't have the outside knowledge, they can still connect it to something that happened, maybe something they've experienced, or, oh, in my country, we have something kind of like this, and it catches their interest that way.
And Laura, isn't what Kate just said really the distinction between a personal interest versus that situational interest? I like that distinction.
Yeah, I think that it is a good distinction, and it crosswalks what Kate shares and what Becky shared about that. And it also relates to the very last line on the slide, the real challenge of moving learners from situational to personal. So taking content they didn't originally express an interest in, but it's a required part of their program. How do we help them make personal associations with that and see and help generate that buy-in from the learner on how this can be applied to their life and how it will help them toward their goals, even if it's not an intrinsic motivator.
Just some comments from the math perspective. Slope is maybe not something everybody's using in their day-to-day life, for example, or exponents. But I tell my students, I can't teach you how to be a mechanic. I can't teach you how to be a medical professional. But I know in those careers and about every career, you've got to pay attention to detail. So I can help you learn how to pay attention to detail. And also, the math that we're covering when we teach the GED is math that their own children, their nieces, their nephews are encountering in school, and to make them aware that they're going to be the cool auntie or whoever who can help with homework. And I just had my most recent GED graduate, before she graduated, let me know that her stepdaughter had come with a Pythagorean theorem problem and she was able to help. And that was just better than anything. So people seeing themselves in new lights.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing, Ruth. And I want to mention we have a few more comments in the chat, and thank you. Shout out to Stephen and Danette for sharing those activity ideas, methods that help us glean students' interests, and maybe will be part of the context that can respond to Kim's question initially. Thanks for kicking us off with that really insightful question, Kim. The research shares these potential strategies for inspiring and learning about our students' interests, getting to know their personal interests. This would be less of an ESL topic, but there are probably creative ways to have them list 5 topics of interest and 5 topics that bore them. Was the example given by the National Research Council, providing meaningful choices of text, topic, or activity. I've seen instructors make efforts to have a few different options, or letting students have input to what order in which they learn things, student voting on topics. And that can be very simply done with, in the physical realm, putting dots on, doing a 4-corner activity and having students stand where they are gravitating toward. And I know we have some good ways to flip things to virtual so that students are voting or giving input to content when it is possible to do so. We have some instructors that have brought laptops into the physical classroom and given the students choices about, based on their level and interest, what article they're going to read on a weekly basis. So kind of like a free reading opportunity. Any other thoughts about that strategy? And you can see some of the other suggested approaches, well-organized materials, using vivid imagery, using content where the students have some background knowledge, especially helpful in ESL, and encouraging creative thinking, making sure students understand, providing them the supports and tools they need to comprehend it. And also, there may not be a faster way to lose a student's interest than to give them content that they don't understand and don't understand as relating to their lives. And as we heard from Ruth, having some really creative ways to create buy-in and let students know why this content is going to be valuable for them. Okay, here's an opportunity to engage in the chat. Please add just your gut feeling of how do you feel you do in inspiring and learning your students' interests on a scale of 1 to 10. Go ahead and put your number in the chat. No judgment, just an opportunity to reflect and express how are you doing in your classrooms on this strategy. Thank you, thank you. Thanks for adding your thoughts.
Can I have you repeat that question?
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you learn about and inspire your students' interest? I would concede that this is an ongoing challenge. We have new students coming in all the time, and different groups have different interests. It may be the same level of student at different times of day, but your evening class has more interest in history than the morning class, and they're interested in getting a job.
Or what countries they're from. You got 14 countries or 12 countries in a classroom, and just based on the fact of their background knowledge would affect their interests as well. You know, all those, there's so much.
For sure. The backgrounds of our previously educated students and the interests of our students with limited and interrupted formal education. Individuals who came as refugees and individuals who came as immigrants and native English speakers, all in the same beautiful learning community. Awesome. Thanks everybody for those ratings. I appreciate your honesty. And yeah, I'd agree with Silka. There's always room for improvement. I would love to learn more about our students' interests. Next question, what activities and approaches do you currently use to learn and inspire learning interest? Anything that hasn't already been mentioned that you use right now? Feel free to write it in the chat or unmute your mic.
This is nothing new or awe-inspiring, but just the small talk at the beginning of class. You know, what'd you do today? And, you know, this person cooked and this person knitted and this person went to the gym, or this person was training her daughter how to lift weights at the gym. And then you remember that when you talk about exercise, then that person might have insights to share. Just, you know, just the little everyday things.
I think I agree. It's the everyday things, like we talk about the weather, and the students are in different cities. So we ask, what's the weather like in, let's say, Yankton, or what's the weather like in Mitchell? And we can compare answers and the different temperatures, and they get a feeling of where each student is from, and build a more cohesive kind of community atmosphere. I think things that are the same, they all have an interest in. Anyway, that's something that we do every day, as well as like what Debbie was saying, like, what did you do this weekend, or whatever, things like that.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
Sure, if it's a regular thing, but I have a lot of my students are from Cuba. I would say the majority are from Cuba. Many years ago, I was able to go down to Cuba when President Obama was in office. we have a little more ability to travel down there. So I went down there on an academic exchange program. So I've been able to utilize my very limited experience down there and talk to some of the students from Cuba and share with them. And they shared quite a bit with me and talked about the difference between English in Havana and English out in the country. And so that's been helpful. But I don't want to exclude students that aren't from Cuba. So I just do it gingerly, I guess. So.
With whatever we do in class, I always try to relate it back to the students' home countries. Like right now, we're talking about driving rules and road signs. Do you have those signs in your country? You know, which ones do you have there and that we don't have here? How are people driving? You know, where did you get your license? So I always give them an opportunity to share what's going on, you know, and compare it to their country. And then when we do group work, yep, they're talking about, you know, what it is in their country, and two people from opposite ends of the world in oral one with very limited English. I hear them talking like, what is your name? Where are you from? You know, just really basic, but they're still communicating.
Wonderful, thank you, Stephen and Silka. And thanks, Heather, for your thoughts in the chat about building relationships and having students share and teach about things from their own country. It really resonates with what you were saying, Silka. Anything you would add? Do you think what would you do to enhance your knowledge of your students' interests? What would you do to enhance your knowledge of your students' interests?
I like to ask a lot of questions to get to know them, since I am very new. And that way I'm learning more about them, taking notes along the way. And yeah, including that into the lessons.
Great. Aubrey or Audrey?
Aubrey.
Aubrey. Thank you. Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you, Aubrey.
You too.
Very good.
I have learned quite a bit about my students in the past when I regularly did dialogue journals in my literacy class. And it's not a high level class. It's maybe intermediate level ESL class, but they did become much better at sort of the fluency of writing. And I feel like I really got to know a lot about them that they wouldn't have had time, maybe time to share all that with me individually, but in writing, they were able to really tell me a lot of things about their life and their past and what they like as well. So there's value to that.
I know not all teachers are part of the intake process, but I am, and I learn a lot about the students when I do the intakes. Unsolicited, they will tell me their entire life story. And I try to remember some of the things they said they're interested in. I was a soccer coach in my country, or I was a nurse, and try to tie that into class later.
I think if you're also willing to share a little bit about yourself, now not oversharing, of course, or anything untoward, but for example, I was telling my students in class yesterday, I was really excited and I was expecting a very important text from my friend who had a baby yesterday. And I said, so if you see me shrieking because I'm looking at my phone and the baby's here, that's why. And then, of course, everyone started talking about their kids and their families and showing pictures, and it was lovely. So just to be able to say a small thing about what I'm thinking and what I'm experiencing, I think opens up for them to say that as well.
Very good
These are all
point,
really
Kate.
terrific points. Sorry, there's a comment or two in the chat And it makes me think of an experience when a number of you brought your students, adult ed and English language learning students to Pier for the field trip. And, you know, it's been a number of years since I've been in the ESL classroom. And so, you know, coming in that sort of that cold call and making small talk and, you know, as people would in a line or at a school or wherever, you know, do you have family? And so to Ruth's point about, you know, prying and Kate about oversharing and sensitivities, you know, I'd asked the woman about if she had any children, and of course she had lost children in the war from which she was, you know, a refugee, a asylee refugee. And, you know, even I feel uncertain at times what's culturally appropriate. And so I appreciate some dialogue there and assurances or
Well,
guidance.
and you never know what's going to trigger, because a lot of the people are dealing with PTSD. You know, I have a tell me about this picture, and it was a picture of a house, and she goes hysterical, and I'm like, oh, and of course when you're hysterical and you're not speaking the language, you're like, I don't know what I did. So yeah, I kind of Ruth's question about, you know, like over prying or oversharing, it's like sometimes you don't even know what is going to trigger, because so many of the people we work with are dealing with trauma.
Well, and I always just let them initiate it. Like whatever they want to share, let them share. And I almost never even ask the question. It just usually comes up, and whoever wants to share shares, and who doesn't.
Well, and that rule about never asking a question that you don't want to know the answer to, you know, you have to be kind of careful that way. Yeah.
Although in a couple others, you know, I found myself, even with work here in our delivery model, virtual meetings and water coolers and forced elbow rubbing, and, you know, do we read trivia to each other? And now the latest trend is to share an item that's on your desk and tell people about it, right? So you're gonna learn, oh, I like Diet Coke or whatever it might be. Oh, this is
Oh
from,
my God.
yeah.
I would be so sick during that meeting
But-
time.
But, you know, I just didn't know if, like, in the virtual, if that's an opportunity to, you know, again, it kind of meets the learner where they are. They don't need to overshare. It can be something mundane, but, you know, in the real world, someone's gonna be, hey, what is that? Where'd you get that? I don't know if there's any real world application to be able to, you know, certainly there is about talking about the weather. That's part of culture. Anyway.
To your point, John, I remember watching a video. I think Literacy Minnesota made it back during COVID. They were doing classes from home, and they had in the video, they had a very low level learner, beginning level. She was showing an item in their class or in her home, exactly as you said. I think it was just something simple like a plastic cup. You know, nothing fancy, something everyone would have in their class, but you know, the ability at the low level, the ability just to describe an item. It's a cup. It's, you know, white. It was cheap. And you could even bring that up at a higher level. So I think it is certainly possible. Now, of course, if you say show an item, you don't know what you're going to get. Are you going to get a cup, or you're going to get something crazy? But you know, I guess you do kind of like, I forget if it was Becky or Kim say that when you open that door, you don't know what you're going to get.
This is why online instructors relish the ability to mute and turn off the camera. If you have the controls over that, sometimes things happen that you wouldn't have expected in the online world.
Reminding people to put shirts on, right, Karen? Not Karen, she wore a shirt.
Or cover yourself up if you're breastfeeding your child.
Mhm. Let's go to the next strategy, which is modeling success. Yes, some fascinating stories, right, Turn? That's right. We have lots of stories in adult education. When modeling success, this is research shared by Cummings, 2007, very dense, very excellent research by Cummings. Who can read this for us?
I can read it. Entrance into services includes recruitment, intake, and orientation. This is the time when programs prepare students to be successful in learning. The first step is to help students express clear goals. The second step is to co-develop a written learning plan that includes both instruction and support services needed.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. So this builds up to the next statement, but we needed this context to understand where he was coming from. When Becky presented at the last T3 on the topic of journey to retention, this is something that came up and it gets to come up again. It's that important that thinking about the entrance experience when students are recruited during intake and orientation, preparing learners. First, to express clear goals, which I think we have so much creative opportunity to explore with our students, particularly for me with ESL students. And the second, to develop a clear written plan together that includes both their instructional plan and support services. I think this is really fascinating and something that we're exploring as a local program. Here is his next statement that connects to modeling success. Who can read this for us?
Oh, I can read. During this period, students would have a chance to meet other adults who are like them in most ways and have been successful in reaching their learning goals. Some of these successful students might be paid employees of the program who can help students build their self-efficacy.
Beautiful articulation. Thank you so much, Naoko.
Thank you.
This is where the modeling success comes in, that it's recommended by this research to have other adults that are very much like the students we're working with and who've had success toward their goals to meet the new student. They might be paid employees of the program, or they may be current students or former students. That is something that came up in this research, is an opportunity when budgets allow. I smile when I say that because I know that's not always possible. But when budgets allow, that could even be a programmatic investment in giving a stipend to current or former students to be an ambassador of the program. And in some cases, volunteers. I loved the testimonials shared by Cornerstone staff as you had what was it, like a student council where you had student leadership within the program and really achieved some incredible things and gave voice to the needs of the student body. Efforts like that really can contribute toward the modeling of success. Let me go to the next statement for our discussion, and that is the J2R, or Journey to Retention strategy, mentioned in the AIR training, was to introduce new students to senior students, alumni or staff who have also been successful. How do our programs in South Dakota facilitate this?
When I was at Northern for a couple years, getting my master's, I worked at the ESL Institute there. I don't think that's still going, is it, Jennifer? I don't think that's still operative. But
I am not 100% sure to say.
I don't think it is, but anyhow, they had an interesting program where they would take like a mid-level group of students, and once a week they'd sort of commingle them with a lower level and for tutoring and mentoring. It'd probably be pretty Herculean to organize something like that, but have they ever considered something like that as a possibility? But maybe with the use of breakout rooms or something, but probably not.
Maybe in some forms, Stephen, I appreciate you sharing from that experience. We in our online classes, we've heard the instructors talk about having the higher level students support the lower level students, also having to marshal that a little bit, depending on the purpose of that stage of the lesson. They might say, let's just pause, let the teacher help first. But there are a lot of opportunities to foster that mentorship in an online classroom if you have some on the higher end, some on the lower end, and in the in-person classroom as well. Some of our teachers have talked about the possibility of having higher level students supporting lower level students, but not something that we've had a lot of experience with. So I think it has potential, Stephen.
I think it probably works better, Laura, too, probably in-house than online, I think. You know.
Laura, oh, sorry, go ahead, Debbie.
Oh, I was just gonna say, an example of, most of us are online, so, but in-person class, we do sometimes, if the high group has written some kind of composition, they'll come and read it to the lower level as their audience, and vice versa. We've had the lower level students interview each other and then go read their paragraphs to the higher levels. They think that's pretty fun. And then in Yankton, we have a very special case. Some of our former students who aren't our students anymore are now like the LSS social worker or the South Dakota Voices for Peace health community health care worker, and they come to our classes to talk about their services, and they always mention how Cornerstones help them learn English, and so they get to see, you know, the potential for after I learn more English.
I think this could be successful, but I think it also depends very much on which students we're talking about. Something I often do, I think everyone does in classes, is pair high and low students together, but you have to know who's getting paired with who. Some students, they love that. Some higher level students love working with the lower level. They love taking on that teacher role. They have the heart for that. Some students don't want to do that. They absolutely don't have the patience for that. So I think I can see a couple students in my mom who would be wonderful mentors in that role. And I can see some other high level students who, no way, Jose, they're here to learn, not to teach.
I think too, I'm just reminded, I just forwarded the email with the GED grad day information to our staff. And even just, you know, highlighting who those success stories have been and what their experiences with a program have been, not necessarily in that national forum, but just locally as well. If you can ask some of those students as they're successful, you know, we always try and share graduation photos on our Facebook page and let everyone see those. But, you know, maybe going that one step further and inviting them to come in to a class or two and just share their experience as a student and what it took for them to be successful could be a good practice as well.
So many good comments. And I appreciate Kate's point about knowing those personalities. To your point, Becky, and I know Kate Crandall, or I believe Kate Crandall is on, as well as Renee Schneider from the Career Learning Center of the Black Hills. They do a terrific job with their GED ceremony. I believe it's at least once a year, if not twice a year, and often have. So it's not journey to retention, it's really journey to recruitment, where they have student speakers at that graduation ceremony. And I wonder if they don't elicit some other people who are interested in word of mouth. And but like you said, bringing that speaker into the classroom would also then be a journey to retention opportunity to really highlight or showcase their skills. Oh, thank you.
I was reminded that this could work for citizenship class too. So when new students are asking about citizenship classes or what you need to do to get your citizenship, there's usually students in the room who have already gone through the process, and turn to them as the experts. Oh, tell them about how was it? What did you do to prepare? So using those who've already passed the interview.
Those are really fantastic examples and comments. Yeah, and John, good point about the retention and recruitment portion. I think many of us would share the experience that many of our students come to us because a friend told them. So word of mouth referrals is part of the recruitment. And then for retention, I'm really fascinated by the research study that Becky brought up last time that connects once again to this modeling of success. And that is within the first few weeks of enrollment, how imperative it is, based on some research findings, for students to share with each other not just their wins, but what their challenges have been in coming to class and getting to class, in their journey of learning English, sharing their struggles with each other and how they overcame them. And according to that study, it really opened my eyes of the value of students hearing from each other, not just the wins and what's easy, but hearing what makes them gritty, persistent, resilient. What did they do to overcome their barriers is what led to a drastic increase in retention in that program that was studied. Another example they gave in that research was of having a hero text. If not that student coming in, or I would love to leverage that, Debbie, that you shared about having an LSS caseworker that used to be a student, or a community healthcare worker that used to be an English learner in an adult ed program, having them come in and tell how they were successful, how they overcome their barriers, or presenting texts from local stories like Becky shared, or historical figures, and integrating that into classroom instruction to model success.
Laura, I just had a thought. I wonder if it would have some details that would need to be worked out, but I wonder if even at our own program, if our high level students could write a little something about how they have overcome difficulties in learning English, and it could be like a text in the next month's packet, or even for a lower level class, depending on vocabulary. Like, this is a student who's literally in our program right now, and we could read about them in our own packets, at our own school.
I think it's a brilliant idea, Amy.
And then they could be a guest speaker after we read their story. And they could read their own story for us, like reading time at the library.
But let's make it a party too, with snacks and cookies.
Sounds good to me.
Why not both? Yes. Wonderful, wonderful ideas. I like it. Here's your opportunity to think about how well do we model success in our program? Do we have room for improvement? Probably always have room for improvement. I'm gonna kind of quickly move along. Don't feel shy to add that in the chat. What would you rate your class on a scale of 1 to 10 for how well success is modeled? And I think we discussed these two questions pretty well. The next topics may take more time than we have available, so we might want to pause it, but I'll do a quick overview and see if we have a future opportunity to discuss this further, because cost benefit connections are really, really a rich element of creating student buy-in. You can read through some of those thoughts there. And this is some of the research telling us about considering how our students can remove demotivating barriers. And looking at the bold, being able to identify that this is a worthy investment of their time and that they'll be able to handle the sacrifices that are being made to family time or working overtime. And this is one thing we've discussed, is helping students see this correlation. Why not use a reading of a graph to help convey the cost benefit of education versus earnings? Our first step in that intake and orientation process is helping students express clear goals that reflect their motives for learning. And the second step, very dense, but helping them identify the skills and knowledge they need, identifying what's their instruction and self-study that will help them get there, as well as the support services like counseling or career navigation. And I love that first bullet point after number 3 on your screen. Encourage episodes of participation, letting students know it's both accepted and expected that they will come and go, and helping them understand how to re-enter services. This process of developing a written learning plan in step 2 enables our students to count the cost of their own personal investment in their education. And C is monitoring, giving the students a way to monitor the progress that they're making. During instruction, teachers can use student goals and their supports and barriers as the content of learning activities that build language, literacy, and math skills. And out of those discussions, this relates to our previous conversation. There may be barriers that come up in the classroom setting that we don't know how to solve, but students may help each other solve as they talk about barriers and overcoming them. They give each other advice. It doesn't always have to be the teacher, but program staff may be able to make referrals to community partners or agencies that can support them. And this was really impactful for me to see this 2005 research that during interviews with students, many reported that they believed once they stopped attending, they could not come back. A majority of students during this interview, or many, I should say. And re-engagement procedures for staying in contact with students that have left the program, that is an important programmatic support that we can offer. How do we re-engage? How do we stay connected with students that have left? Our program has explored some of that. And I think we have opportunity to discuss that more as a state in terms of what are we doing to engage. Those intermittent learners are the majority, and the research states if it's hard for us to determine upon enrollment, what kind of student this is. Are they a long-term student? Are they a tryout student? Are they an intermittent learner? Or are they someone who just needs to not even join our program right now, but come back in the future when life has more ease for them to participate? The research says if we can't determine, because they're an English language learner, what kind of students they are, we can assume that they're an intermittent student because that is the majority. But are we empowering those students to know that yes, they are expected to take breaks, encouraged to when they need to, but also given all the tools they need and the safety to come back when they're ready or to enter another program?
Laura, I really appreciate you stressing this point in that research. And I know time is limited. I don't want to digress, but I do feel curious, given the range of learners from SLIFE learners, pre-literate learners, you're talking about this written plan. Do we meet the learners where they are in terms of the goals and the, program of study and the supports?
Yes, yes, definitely. Inspired by our previous T3, the research that went out and the NRS training, I've been working with our local program on what are some ways that what that might look like. And we're in the process of drafting. I'm very excited. We're drafting a student handbook that we will publish and give to each student in very, very basic English with very basic graphic organizers, but also some more advanced opportunities to engage with this learning plan in that handbook. So it will serve a variety of language proficiencies. And as we pilot that, we'll be happy to share how it works and also hear from other programs on how are you approaching that opportunity for a written learning plan. Thank you, John, for your comment. I'm going to bring us right to the final comments. We delved deeply into the first two components, and you got a bird's eye overview of the last two today. And these are the 8 pillars we'll continue to explore in T3s. And Becky, do you want to say anything about the topics of the next T3?
The next T3, we're going to be looking at flexibility. And I was actually just working on that earlier today. I'm very excited about it. And I know that you're all going to have amazing input on the ways that we can be flexible in order to help our students persist.
Thank you, Becky.
Yeah, thank you, Laura, for the facilitation today. And I want to thank everyone for attending, for participating, sharing, self-reflecting on a numerical scale. It's really been great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. And in announcements, you can see on the screen, one of the topics we didn't delve deeply today is about that student buy-in through representation and voice. And so this is one of the recommendations of research is that our leadership and our staff are educated on cultural competency. Here's a free training series you're welcome to join into. And then the ELIDP, having a very low-cost accessible training program is another one of the tenets of this research, which South Dakota does so well with our 2 IDP programs that allow people to get training and mentorship that will help them retain whether they were born in the US or whether they're diverse or representative of color. These are some of the best practices that South Dakota is doing really well. Thanks everybody for joining today. Thank you for taking the time and for the robust participation. Thanks for the opportunity, John.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.